Welcome back to another episode of Destin Talks to Random Cool People. This time I'm talking to Nick from Second Wind. Nick, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Just getting ready to travel again after just getting back from DC 2 days ago.
Right. What were you doing in DC? Can you tell us?
Yeah, we were filming the fourth season of our D&D show, Adventures Nigh. And then we're turning around and going straight from there to San Francisco for GDC.
Cool. Are you looking forward to seeing anything in GDC?
Uh, just people from the industry, live in the Midwest, so don't really get to hang out with people from the industry very often unless, I go on a shoot somewhere. This is flyover zone, so it can get pretty boring out here sometimes.
I bet. Separate from that, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got started in this space for those who don't know, and what you've been up to?
Sure. Well, I'm Nick. I've been covering games since I was a freshman in high school. Ran a few of my own sites, and then ended up becoming the editor-in-chief of the Escapist back in July of 2019. Ran that for just under 5 years, and then was fired back on November 6th, which I think the whole internet has seen at this point. And then the very next day, we basically started up Second Wind, our own independent games media outlet that's just kind of doing the same thing we were doing at the Escapist, but without some corporate dickhead over us.
Can you tell us a bit about how that all came together? I've read the story, but I'd love to hear it in your own words.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I didn't really have access to, the coast or anything like that to kind of get more into the games media space. So I spent a lot of time running my own sites and really just teaching myself how to do things, working with other people that I met online as volunteers all across the board until I sold my first site, Only SP, to Enthusiast Gaming back in around middle of 2017. And by then I kind of had decided I was kind of done with games media because that was one of the first times that Google kind of just killed a bunch of sites when they did some big algorithm change. And my site was one of the victims of that, where we went from 200,000 visits a month to 25,000 visits a month overnight. And I just, wasn't making money from it. I was like, whatever. So last ditch effort to keep it alive, sold it to Enthusiast Gaming. And then I kind of quit games media for a while. And then I saw Daniel Dwyer at GameSpot, kind of went to Poland for this Witcher kind of doc thing. And, he's this shot I'll always remember is him just standing out in the fields of Poland, basically reporting on this game. And I was like, I kind of want to do that. I kind of want to travel the world and actually go speak to the people I've been writing about for, years at this point already. So I ended up running a Kickstarter with some friends and having that funded and doing documentaries on games for a while. So we did documentaries on Darksiders, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Battle Chasers, Night War, a couple other games. And then ended up selling that to Enthusiast Gaming. They brought me on as managing editor of video. Escapist kind of half imploded while right before then. So then I did E3 with them and then became the editor-in-chief of the Escapist. So obviously, I've done a lot of podcasts kind of talking about my time on the Escapist, but over that time, I essentially, used that time to develop the team that we have now at Second Wind, paired them up with, star power like Yahtzee Croshaw, Jack Packard, and Marty Sleva. And then, over the years, kind of just kept building up that team and personalities and stuff like that so that we weren't just a SEO farm, which unfortunately the Escapist is now an SEO farm and nothing else. But and then, it all came to a head in November last year, got fired, team walked out with me, and then here we are almost 5 months later on Second Wind doing our thing.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to see how quickly it all happened and the success story of it, because it seems like you're sustainable, if not profitable, right?
Yeah, we are in a very good position. We foregoed salaries for about 3 months so that we could just build a war chest of funds, and so that we basically have a slush fund for a rainy day. But the Patreon has stayed stable, right around 60 grand a month, and then we've just been taking everything we learned from the Escapists. Even though we were under parent companies, we were selling our own sponsors and fundraising for ourselves the entire time. And so all of that knowledge has really helped stabilize and also follow through on our plan to essentially not rely on one source of revenue ever. And we have, a lot of cooks in the kitchen kind of working on different things to bring revenue in.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. Longer term though, like let's talk about 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Where do you see Second Wind going?
Honestly, like we enjoy what we do. Like, Yasi's been doing ZP for 15 years or I guess fully emblematic now, but he still loves what he does. And I suspect, Frost and Cold Take will be doing that for years to come. So I think we really just want to enjoy our work and do cool projects. And we do so much different stuff, between the D&D campaigns and, we're looking at getting in the board game coverage, and we do our video essays, and we do, GDC trips and all that kind of stuff. It kind of keeps everything fresh. Longer term, at least for me and Yahtzee, like we're still looking at starting up our own indie label, kind of like Donkey has done with Big Mode, kind of getting more into that side of things. And then a lot of people on the team too are actually game developers themselves and working on their own projects outside of Second Wind. So lots of stuff going on.
Yeah,
at all times.
Sure. What are you playing right now?
I can't say what I'm playing right now.
Oh, okay.
Embargo.
What are you playing that isn't under embargo?
I've been playing a lot of Balatro.
Okay.
But I've also been playing a lot of Helldivers too. So I guess the two games that are in the mainstream conversation. Can't really. I tried Power World. I still can't do the survival crafting games. I just get super bored. But Balatro is on my Steam Deck, or well, I guess my Lenovo Legion Go now, like every night. So,
have you been surprised by the resurgence of the AA games? You brought up Helldivers 2, great game. I played a ton of it. It's getting constant updates and being really, really well received by everybody. Are you surprised to see the success of all these AA's? You brought up Balatro, and there have just been a few of these recently. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I'm not really surprised. I feel like a lot of the publishers that have popped up have been in that realm. Kepler Interactive and, Focus Entertainment has really kind of stepped into that AA realm. They're getting into that AAA realm with, I think, Space Marine 2. The major publishers have kind of really focused on the super mass appeal games and licensed stuff. And so we're seeing a lot of startup publishers kind of enter that realm of AA, AAA. We actually just talked about this on our own podcast the other night about how the independent AAA sector is kind of quietly building behind the scenes as all this name talent has left the AAA scene at EA and Ubisoft and all that to go do their own thing again. So it's not surprising. It's going to be interesting to see how many actually succeed and kind of continue on, because there was a lot of funding during the pandemic coming into those studios, and now that's really dried up. And so I think, we'll see a lot of these studios go back to Kickstarter very quickly to find another source of funding to get their games made. But at least for the success stories this year, I think it's been surprise after surprise, and it's kind of good news with all the layoffs going off that some studios are actually seeing really big success stories.
Yeah, we have seen a lot of layoffs. That includes like Microsoft had layoffs, Sony had 1,900, Sony PlayStation had 900. Embracer's going through a massive shift. They just got Saber Interactive is out of there now. I think Gearbox is rumored to be sold or has been sold at this point, and a lot of those IPs are getting freed up. What do you think? Why do you think this is happening in the AAA space, in your opinion?
They hired so much during the pandemic. I mean, we saw the same thing in the media space. That's half the reason I got laid off, because gamers bought us during the pandemic when people were looking to make money and sell things off and hire a lot of people to cash in on all that growth of people being online. So I think so many of them chase the live service trend, and you got to staff. Like, how do you keep up with Call of Duty or Apex Legends or whatever or Fortnite when you need updates going out every 6 weeks at this point? And the only way you do that is basically build these farms of studios that just keep working and working. And when that revenue starts drying up, then the first thing you do is start downsizing from them. So it's really unfortunate, like that Ubisoft and everything has chased these trends so hard. But I think, we've kind of entered that stage where it's a lot like the MMO market, where you have your front runners and Warzone and Warzone, Apex, Siege, Fortnite, and those are the games that are going to be at the top until they make a sequel or whatever they do next.
Yeah, Apex actually getting hit with layoffs today. So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't
like,
know. Like, I did my own video talking about this. I'm like, how do you secure your job at these studios anymore? Like, uh, Spider-Man and Insomniac sold 10 million copies, and they still had layoffs. So, like, what's the measure for success? And these corporations don't even know.
I have to imagine right now in the AAA space, it's hard. It's got to be hard to stay motivated because you have a major success, you get laid off. You have a failure, you get laid off. I saw the meme about this, and it must feel like to those in the space that there's not much that you can do to guarantee security whatsoever. And
Mhm.
I have to wonder how that leaves them feeling. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really have
Uh,
a question. It's just sort of like a remark
yeah,
about the current
yeah.
state of
Well,
things.
like Hollywood, those most of those big movies are just gig work at this point, and it feels like the AAA space has kind of hit that point where if you're gonna work on the next Assassin's Creed or whatever, you treat it as a gig and get ready to move on to the next project afterwards. And I think having done documentaries and interviews for a number of years, like most studios just want to continue making games. They don't worry about let's say have shareholders on board. Basically they want to make their game and use the funds to make the next game and pay themselves.
And as we
Uh,
know, as we all know, the most important thing to think about is the shareholders. That's what Embracer taught us, right?
yep.
You got
Oh
you
yeah.
got to consider them in all of this.
Embracer is THQ all over again. Same exact thing happened.
What do you think about Warner Brothers having a massive success with Harry Potter and then a massive failure with Suicide Squad, and then coming out and saying, "Yeah, we're going to make more games like Suicide Squad." It just seems so ridiculously out of touch to me.
Yeah, I read some threads from like developers on that. They were like, he was at a shareholders conference and basically has to say whatever he has to say to hype them up. But if we'll see how Multiverses does, I guess, and if that doesn't do well, maybe they're going to change their tune around real quick. But yeah, I know Warner Brothers hasn't had a successful live service game yet. I mean, Evolve was under Warner Bros. And that failed. You had Suicide Squad, so all their successes in publishing have been single player games. I don't know what they're thinking there. But this is going to be the same thing like Ubisoft, where how many free to play games that Ubisoft have in development? Like 16, and they've canceled most of them
Yeah.
at this point.
I think the Ghost Recon like Battle Royale, I think that deal had legs and I think they axed it, right? If
Yeah,
I
Ghost
remember.
Recon Frontline. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, well, it's not perfect, but it's one of your better ideas out of all the IPs that I've seen what you've done with. Like, yeah, I just don't get it. It's just like Sterling said, and I said this in the previous one of these that I did, they don't want money, they want all of the money. And that's a problem because like you made $1 billion or something with Harry
Yeah.
Potter. That's not enough. Nintendo learned a long time ago to make something sustainable, right? They have a philosophy of not doing layoffs, and they really try and keep the staff that they have because that's how you are able to create wonderful products like Nintendo does. It's by retaining people and making them excited to come to work and having a sense of security, right? So say what you will about the performance of the Switch and how it's sort of aging out, but they have not been impacted by any of this yet, and their profit margins on the games that they do release are very high. So
Yeah.
I almost wonder if just the bubble just burst. $300
Uh,
million. Like, what are you doing?
yeah. A lot of people have been, you know, railing on about AAA and what that means. And
Mhm.
the first AAA game was technically Final Fantasy VII when budgets were between 30 and 50 million back then.
Mhm.
Uh, and now budgets are 100, 300 million. And then you have quadruple A games, and everybody was rallying on Skull and Bones for CEOs saying, "Oh, it's a quadruple A game," as it's a marketing term at this point. It's just like, well, they spent 10 years on it. Of course, it's a quadruple A game. They've put how many hundreds of millions of dollars into making that thing for it
What?
to basically die out of the gate again.
Yeah. This year in 2024, it's been a slow news week, so I'm mostly just talking with you about
Yeah.
whatever. So this year, 2024, what has been your favorite game, and what's been the biggest disappointment that you've seen thus far?
Favorite game has definitely been Helldivers 2. It's just a really fun multiplayer experience that I can keep coming back to. I like my multiplayer games, but for almost 8 years, I've spent most of it on Siege, Rainbow Six Siege. So it's nice to have a new game to play.
It's a good game.
Yeah, it's nice to have a new game to play in that realm with my friends. So yeah. I mean, honestly, that game's probably entered among my top 10 favorite games I've ever played already.
Siege or Helldivers?
Helldivers too. Yeah, but biggest disappointment. To be quite frank, I haven't gotten to a lot of the games that I wanted to yet. Just I've been so busy getting the company set up and traveling and working on different stuff. But I did just finish Grand Blue Fantasy Relink the other day, and it starts off really, really good with, well, sort of good. The story makes zero sense to me. I don't watch the anime, and I don't know what Grand Blue is for the most part. It just looked like a fun game to play, but it's got a really good opening. And then it very quickly devolves into pretty bland story and world and everything, with a lot of references that I had no idea what the hell they were talking about the entire time. Turns out the game is more of a Monster Hunter type game in the end game, which I did not know. So
I think I gotta agree with you. I know a lot of people would say Pal World. Pal World was pretty fun. I just did the basics. I just got to the first boss and fought the first boss. I didn't play a ton like everybody else. I think a lot of people would say Power World, and I think that is definitely one worth mentioning for 2024. Given all the drama surrounding that game, my goodness, everybody just wanted to hate that game because it did Pokemon and nobody else was doing Pokemon. And it's like, yeah, well, they did it. They seem covered.
Yeah.
Nintendo doesn't seem to be going after them. They're looking into it, but nothing happened. And turns out they didn't use AI to make all the Pokemon, and there's the whole model drama. But anyway, that game gets an honorable mention from a lot of people. I agree with you. I think Helldivers is really, really cool. And I would throw Last Epoch in there. Those are the ones that
I'm playing that a lot too.
Yeah, those are the ones that I definitely put some time into. Even been hopping back into Destiny to get my stupid hoverboard in the Guardian games this year. But yeah, I think we have had a good stable of games. My pick for best, I agree with you, Helldivers 2. And I say that because of how promptly the CEO addressed the server issue and how open he was with communication. And there's some weapon balance drama going on right now, and they're consistently communicating very openly about what's going on behind the curtain. And I think that is so welcome these days. And the game has managed to hold numbers in the community,
Yeah. Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate 3 was really doing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Their head of publishing, Michael, he's been very vocal with the community, and Swen, CEO and creative director, has also been very open. So it's been nice to see studios be more open. There's also the developer this week. I'm gonna butcher their name, but they made Deliver Us Mars and Deliver Us the Moon. They're looking for funding, and basically they've pitched 180 different things and haven't gotten funding for their games yet. So they're kind of came out and said, all right, here's the 5 games we're working on, and here's what we want funding to make them, basically. And it was kind of nice to see that too, because sometimes it's hard to get invested in a studio when it's so secret for so long and you have no idea what they're doing. And they want funding and community support and all that, but it's well, you're just a studio name, and these guys basically laid out their plans for the next 5, 6, 7 years, and it's okay, well, if I want to invest in the studio and put my money forward, and I know what I'm going to be getting later on.
Yeah, and I can't help but look at what Larian did and how well they did. You brought them up with their PR person, Michael is his name, right? Mm-hmm. Just being really open, and with how that game was made, yes, it's a larger team, but with less money and fewer people than most AAA studios, they were able to create a product that was a massive success. And yeah, they cut it close a few times throughout the years. I believe Divinity was one of their first big gambles when they were really low on funds. Divinity Original Sin.
Yeah, I mean, I did the documentary on them, so yeah, the Divinity Original Sin was basically the last chance for that studio to do something, because they were basically out of money after Dragon Commander and all that, and they got fucked over by publishers 3 different times with Divine Divinity, Beyond Divinity, and Divinity 2, which is a third-person RPG on the Xbox, and I don't know how many people played, but yeah, I mean, Larian has the real underdog story behind them, and we actually just rewatched the documentary that we made on them when we were out filming in DC, and it was like just going back and hearing how Swen was talking about, this next game. It was like we just want to be the greatest RPG makers ever, basically.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's just awesome to hear, and it's just so weird to see them come in, do this thing, and see the rest of the space sort of have a reaction to it. That's like, well, how is this even possible? Like, I don't know how to do this. And I have to wonder if that's because there's a really nasty cycle going on in the industry right now where people will look at Larian Studios and they are in a workflow where that would be impossible, because AAA relies on microtransactions to fund development. They rely on any money that they can possibly get to make a game. And here comes Larian, who has been operating outside of all that. And they just show everybody how it's done. And hopefully they're all looking at what Larian did and trying to figure out how to do that in their own spaces. But another movie that was a huge success that did it on a much lower budget than everybody else was Dune 2, which is another big story where they did it for a fraction of what most of the movies are costing today. So I think it's really refreshing, in my opinion. And, I did the controversial Baldur's Gate video over on IGN where I just kind of said, I do still believe that having high standards isn't a problem, or taking risk isn't a problem. And, there's no safety net anymore. So try and do the best thing possible you can for customers. And I don't think devs are out there trying to make like garbage. I think they get in unfortunate situations where they have to make the microtransactions, or they're in content houses at some point where it's just like, all right, texture these 500 different boxes. It seems like something's broken in the AAA space is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember which company or interview or whatever it was, but I just remember about there was an interview, like, this was years ago, but they were basically talking about player engagement and how a player should have something to run into in the game world like every 20 steps, or and whether that's loot or a quest or something. And like, that's the nice thing about like the games that I remember, like Kingdom Come Deliverance or even Divinity or Baldur's Gate or whatever, like those worlds aren't just filled with meaningless filler content. Like, you have to travel to get somewhere, and part of it's the journey of getting to that quest and finding a thing or getting that piece of loot that was really hard to get to. And now you play the Assassin's Creed games and like you got to collect gear every 2 seconds, or whatever it is. And I feel like so many AAA games just kind of fell into this trap. Like even God of War Ragnarok, like in God of War 2018, like what is the purpose of having loot in those games at all? When it was God of War 1 through 3 never had it, and it was completely fine. And so like so many of these games, they want players spending all of their time in them, or as much time as possible, for whatever arbitrary reason, because either games media or gamers in general are like, I'm not getting my money's worth unless this game's 50 hours or something like that.
And I think there's some mixed messaging there, right? Mm-hmm. Because a good gameplay loop like Helldivers, you'll spend 50 hours in that game if you want to. It's a fun game. The progression system is quite nice. I actually disagree with you on Ragnarok, though. I don't mind the gear system. And what it did for me as a player is it allowed you to sort of like mix and match and make some interesting builds, and it kind of added to the fun. Ragnarok also did the extremely pro-consumer thing of adding that huge DLC Valhalla, which was excellent. And you just use an example that happens to be like one of my favorite games of all time and one of my favorite franchises of all time. So
I love God of War. I just don't. Yeah, I'm working on something right now that's kind of talking about how I'm sick of being in menus all the time,
min-maxing and
and like Suicide Squad, the same thing. Like I don't give a shit about all these different weapons. Like, I've seen that all before in every other game I've had to play for coverage. And Banishers Ghost of New Eden has a whole loot system, and I'm like, why? It doesn't matter to me. Just let me unlock a new weapon as I go.
Well, you are getting onto something, though. It's about player retention. They want high retention metrics because they know the longer you're in a product, the more likely you are to be converted into a purchaser or an upsell opportunity for them. Now,
Yep.
Ragnarok's not a good example because they actually don't really have a store or anything you can buy your money in. So it's just, that was just a gameplay element. But if you talk about like what's Destiny is a great example, right? Guardians games is going on right now. You can buy the Sparrow, and I could have had it day one and then just never play it again for $20 or $24 and get the bundle or whatever. Or I can play the game and get it for free. Now, either one is great for the developer because they get player retention metrics, and the people that want to grind it out are more likely to want to buy something in the store or more likely to get addicted to the game again. That game really does have good gameplay, and it's hard to put it down once it gets its hooks back in. But I stopped playing for like a year because I was so burnt out on it. But that's the reason. It's retention.
Well, and I think what most of them have forgot is like, people stuck with World of Warcraft for years and years and years because they have friends, and the quest is, and questing with their friends is why they're coming back. They're not coming back to just smack enemies around every day. They're coming back to have those adventures with their friends and stuff like that. And so many of these games are so heavily focused on the loot aspect of it over the gameplay. And so like that, the Helldivers too, right, is people keep coming back to it not because you're unlocking stuff or collecting cosmetics or whatever. It's because like the gameplay's emergent and it's constantly having fun moments in it. So Destiny has those things with, you work towards the raids and all that. I think that's kind of why people stick with Destiny for so long. But Ubisoft wants to do Assassin's Creed Infinity and have this whole platform now where you go into a game from this platform to get into your game, Fortnite style. What does that look like? And how are they going to monetize that? Or are you going to have to now buy cosmetics for your character that you would have originally just earned in the game or found? It's
for which one?
Assassin's Creed. We have Code Red. We have Code Red coming up, which is going to be that.
And you got to turn off the ads when they pop up in between missions.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Remember when that glitch happened?
Yeah, glitch. That was let's see what we can get away with. Are people going to notice this? Yeah. As far as like I'm not gonna, like, I still enjoy Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't really excite me like it used to. Like when we back at E3, we saw the reveal of Assassin's Creed 2 for the first time, and everybody's like, "Holy shit, this looks amazing!" And now you're like, "Oh, it's another Assassin's Creed." So I'm much more interested in all the studios that have formed in the AAA space or the indie AAA space, where we just got 2 more studios this week with Skull Games, and then I forget the other one. The other one has a weird name, but former.
More like AA Space, right?
I mean, their press releases say they have AAA funding behind them. So,
that's great.
That's No Moon was announced a few years ago, and they got $100 million investment up front for whatever they're working on. You have Gravity Well. You've got a studio in Poland working on Dawnwalker, Rebel Wolves. They've got big money behind them. So feels like a lot of the big name devs and the studio heads, a lot of these places basically took their money, said, hey, we're going to bring the team with us that made Battlefield, like Embark did, where they're working on the finals and Arc Raiders, and that's kind of an easier sell to give money to a team that, I don't know, you look at EA right now. BioWare's had hit miss after miss lately. The last 3 Battlefield games have launched poorly and took years to rebuild. So it's and that's all a culmination of laying people off and losing your star power, your creative directors and stuff, because you just put them to the grindstone at these things.
I feel like AAA just totally lost their way. They forgot what the most important thing is, and it's good gameplay. They got too caught up with monetization strategies, and it's damaged the overall experience of for the player. So you get all these AA games that answer to nobody. They just make cool games with great gameplay, and everyone's like, this is why we love gaming. And it is so incredibly refreshing to just keep encountering these things. And it is unfortunate to see the layoffs in the industry and what's happening, but it's because of poor executive decisions and losing sight of the most important thing, and that's great gameplay experiences, in my opinion. That's why the AAA space is suffering more than anything. And of course, there's over hiring during COVID, like you mentioned, and just this change in what is possible. How do you spend what was $300 million on Spider-Man? And I think the breakdown was half of that was for marketing. How is that possible? Or maybe it was Diablo. Diablo was like 150 million for marketing, 150 million for development.
I don't, if I had those answers, maybe I'd be in one of the executive positions up there. But I don't know. I mean, we both work in games media. It's kind of the same thing where, if you work at a corporate media conglomerate, they want infinite growth constantly. There's no bar to reach. And when you do reach that bar, now you got to reach the next bar. And I think, anybody on the creative side, I was on that side where, I was getting asked to do, we were at what, 3.54 million views a month on YouTube. And then suddenly CEO's like, now you got to do 10 million. And it's like, well, how do we get there? Well, I don't know. You'll figure it out. And then if we don't, we get fired. So, it's, I just don't think creative industries and shareholders get along, because creative people just don't care about shareholders. They want to, like I said earlier, you make one thing, you get the money to make your next thing, and you keep making the new things.
I've been very fortunate that my 15 years, I always try and stay honest about what I believe and what I enjoy and what I like. And I always try and create something that's good for the viewer and good for, I don't know, just if I think it's fun, I imagine that the viewer is going to think it's fun. And that's usually what I try and make. Do I always get it perfect? No, there's probably a few articles. There's probably a few articles out there about how I messed up a certain video, but I try to make my point as best as I can. Am I the sharpest tool in the shed? Maybe not, but I am your average Joe talking about video games. And that's what I've been doing for like 15 years, and I'm not going to stop. So and I'm absolutely blessed and fortunate to be in a position like I am, where I get to do that for one of those big companies. And I'm really, really happy with how many opportunities that has brought me over the years. I don't know. I feel very, hearing your situation and watching what unfolded there, it does make me feel grateful for like the leaders that I've had and the opportunities that I've had throughout the years, because it's not fun.
I don't regret working in corporate games media or anything. Like, I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't do it. But yeah, it was 5 years of absolute torture listening to executives that didn't know what they were doing, had no background in media. Just, we'll never go back to it. If second win fails, I'm done with games media. I will never touch it again.
Here's a good one for you. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you get asked this all the time. How do I get into games journalism?
Don't.
You know what? My advice is exactly the same. I'm like, can you make a YouTube video? Start there. Yeah. And if you can figure out the formula on YouTube, you'll probably end up in the industry, or you'll just end up creating your own brand and you're going to be fine. Right?
Yeah. Yahtzee kind of has the best advice, I think, for all of this, is like, if you want to get in new games media to make a living, you're already doing it wrong. Like, you get into, I got into games coverage because I just wanted to tell people about cool games, and I never expected to make a living from it. I wanted to. I had false starts with my parents multiple times, and then when I finally told them, you have a salary, they're like, huh? You getting paid to play video games? Like, no, I get paid to write about video games. Thank you. But just. I especially in the market right now for games and media, unless you're going independent, I wrote up a thing for our own audience a couple weeks ago where I really talked about like how, working for Game Informer or GameSpot or IGN or anything like that used to be the dream of people like me, in the Midwest, that's where you wanted to get to someday. And I think for a lot of people now, it's kind of a stepping stone where, you use a corporate outlet to kind of help build your audience, figure out your voice, work under editors to teach you things, and then eventually go out kind of on your own, independent, if you have the audience to do so. But I'm sure you saw the article on Aftermath about gamers this week, our former parent company. Like, the sad part is like, IGN gets to do all this cool stuff and it's great, but the smaller publishers like Gamers and all that are, every single person there is just an SEO farming machine, and when you're working in that kind of thing, you can get paid well, and like I don't begrudge anybody that goes and does it, because that's what the corporations want, is SEO to drive infinite traffic. So you want the money, you just want to be a workhorse for SEO, that's great. But if you have ambitions beyond that to be creative or anything, it's the worst place for you to be, because you will never have a voice. You're in the background doing the back end work, and there's no audience growth from it. There's no personality growth from it. It's just clicks. And unfortunately for corporations, that's what they think is your audience, or people that click on Google, and it's never the case.
Yeah, I think at a lot of sites that can be true. I absolutely agree with that. You lived it, obviously, so
yeah,
that's what you experienced. I don't know. I didn't experience that. So again,
when IGN's at the top of everything, it's, you can kind of do whatever you want.
I got super lucky. You did hit on something that is really important though. You have to have that heart when you start out. That has to be your focus, not how do I get a job? It's how do I make a video? How do I talk about this thing that I love in an interesting way that engages the audience? And if you start there, you're starting off on the right foot, because you can then learn how to capture video. You can learn how to make your own YouTube videos. And if you start picking up steam there, and your dream really is to work at like who's left? IGN, GameSpot. Who else?
Eurogamer. If for how long
on video?
Yeah.
Like, who is it? It's like 3 outlets. So everybody talks about like how they don't like it. And I'm like, well, there's not much of it left, if you are looking to get in, the opportunities are few and far between. So that's why I always recommend start making a YouTube channel, start making YouTube videos. And especially right now on a really difficult year for the whole world, that's what you should be doing, and focusing on the heart of it. That's how I started. The first things I did, I was a volunteer writer for this website, mygamer.com. My old writing is awful. Please don't go look for it. And then, I started doing news videos for fun, like sarcastic, sort of like really cynical. I'm still pretty cynical. Looks at the industry and what was happening. And that ended up getting me a gig at this website, Screw Attack, that doesn't exist anymore. And Super doesn't exist now that Rooster Teeth shut down, because they ended up being the last ones with the rights to it. And, then I ended up at IGN. But it started with the heart. And that's my advice to everybody. Start something and make sure you're focusing on what's important. And that's talking about the love or disdain for the product. You have like Angry Video Game Nerd exists and stuff like that. Yeah. What was your first thing? What was the first thing you ever did?
There's a website, it still exists, called PSX Extreme. I basically was playing games just too much as a kid. My parents were constantly bugging me, go find something else to do, And I played video games a lot because I had social anxiety and didn't want to go out and do stuff. They basically just kept telling me to find something else to do. And one day I was like, hey, Dad, I want to start a website and write about games. And so this was when I was a freshman in high school, and he bought me a domain name, and I basically started up this little website that I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I forget what it was called. It wasn't Wix, but it was something like Wix. And back on old Wix, you had to like drag and drop every element of every page. And so I started this website where every article we had to do was literally drag and drop every element of the page and put it on there. Just a piece of shit website. But I met these 3 guys on PSX Extreme in the comments that I saw. I assumed they had good writing, because I didn't know how to fucking write back then. Their names were Damian Lordorn, Lachlan Williams, and David Nelson. And I was like, hey, you guys write these really long and really interesting comments a lot. You want to make a website about games together? And we're like, yeah, sure. So at the time, they didn't know I was a freshman in high school. These guys are like in their 20s, and I'm a little teenager. But turns out like 2 of them were actually English teachers. And so over the years, working with them, I learned English writing from them and everything. And they actually still work with me even today, 15 years later. Those guys stuck with me. So but yeah, that's basically where I started. And then review copies when they still sent out physical mailers started showing up in my house, and my dad would go get the mail and come back, and he's like, what's this? I was like, it's a video game. He's like, how'd you buy that? I was like, I didn't. They gave it to me for free. What do you mean they're giving it to you for free?
It was
And
it was
they
weird
just
back
kept,
then.
yep, they just kept showing up, and he just keep handing them to me. He's like, what is happening? What are you doing? So yeah, just even though I was like editor in chief of my own site, so I started on the ground floor writing news like everybody else, working all hours of the day to make this dream of mine happen. Basically, when I got in high school, I would wake up in the morning at 4, write news, go to class, come back, write news, go to sleep, get up, do the same thing again. College, same thing. I was up every day writing news at like 4 o'clock in the mornings. That's when the European news kind of comes out for the US, at least back then when it did, before they sent press releases at all hours of the night. So yeah, I basically crawled and scrawled my way up until I got to where I wanted to be.
That's really inspiring, honestly. It just makes me so happy to hear that, you started with the right intentions in mind, and look at you now, you have your own thing. And I always think it's really exciting to see more people in the space, because we need more voices, not fewer,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really,
That
really
was
happy with that.
that was my mission pretty much at every site I ran, whether it was my own sites or the Escapist, was getting new people in, new fresh perspectives and all that. One, because I couldn't get the budget to hire people that were expensive. But like, half of the second win team are people that never had a job in games media until I hired them, and that's part of the reason they stick with me now, is I gave them all their first shot in the industry. And now we have a team that's really family. Like, these somebody just mentioned in my replies the other day, like they remembered me saying on a podcast, like, I didn't consider my team my family. And it's like, well, when you're the boss of a site like that, you really can't. Like, you got to have some separation between, friends and colleagues and everything like that. But when a whole 12, 15 people, follow you out the door as you're fired, that changes everything for you.
Yeah, I do really like the open nature of how you handle everything. It's really refreshing. But yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Nick, for those who don't know, like, what's the one place you would drag people to see more from Second Wind?
Just our YouTube. I think, if you like video essays about games, or just different personalities or different takes, and not hot takes or the angry drama bullshit that goes on every day, especially right now. I think you'll find a lot to like on Second Wind, including our live streams that are just friends playing games every day, basically just really chill stuff. I think we have something for pretty much everybody.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Nick. And I do
Absolutely.
appreciate you stopping by.
Yep. Thank you for inviting me.
And one more thank you to all of the members that support this channel. I do not have the membership thing built because I am using OBS and not vMix today. So thank you, Nick. We're going to do the outro here really quick. I appreciate everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.